Welcome back, everyone. Craig and Jonah here today. How are you today, Jonah?
Doing pretty good this week. I was watching some ESPN in the morning, and so there's a radio show on in the morning that I listen to, and there's a woman on there. She sounds attractive. I didn't really know what she looked like, but then on the TV side, you can see what she looks like,
Okay.
and she's quite attractive. Michelle Smallman, I think is her name. But so I was thinking,
Hi, Michelle. I'm sure you're watching.
I'm sure she's a huge fan.
Avid listener.
So while I was listening to her break down, different salary cap situations of free agents for the NFL teams, I thought, I wonder what it's like to be married to her. And so I was thinking about it, and I was like, being able to argue with my wife over whether or not the 49ers and a salary cap problem or who they should sign as free agents, maybe that's just a problem that I don't need. I'm not sure what that's like for that guy. If she is married, I really have no idea. But I'm happy to just, maybe have sports be more my domain and not like a joint domain. I don't know.
Yeah,
There's less areas for conflict, I think.
what's the old, there's sort of a.
Because then she can know it all there too, like.
Well, there's a meme that goes around like every man wants a wife, a girl that'll be a hunting, a fishing buddy, and then take her out, and then she's out, outperforming you and telling you how to do stuff. So
Yep.
there may be just certain parts of your life that are just better left to you.
Good to have some separation a little bit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways, that's my only thought. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna quickly apologize in advance. I'm sure Father Ripperger would say that the devil's after us because both cameras stopped working, and I was having some mic issues this morning. So, apologize in advance if there's some technical issues. But I so I was thinking about doing this on my other channel, but I don't listen to a lot of other podcasters and YouTube, in part because I just don't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
But so this week I was listening to two podcasts. One is our dear friend Alan's podcast, Charting Toward Intimacy, which is let's say, how do I compare that to us?
I mean, Humana Vitae by the book.
Yeah, I mean,
Letter of the law.
yeah, she's like us.
We're spirit of the law.
Yeah, she's very much letter of the law.
Yep.
That's a good point. Her audience is primarily women.
Mm-hmm. Who don't like to have sex.
I don't see her
blow.
I don't see her make. I see her making overt efforts not to include the men. So that's just making my observation there. So it's an audience for Catholic women using NFP. She has courses on how to make it more pleasurable for the woman and all that. Which, hey,
that's great.
I'm all for that. Great. But it's very much by the rules. So you really can't get through an episode there without hearing about what is and isn't licit. Like, the rules are always there. If they're not out there front and center, they're in the background.
Mm-hmm.
That finger pointing going on.
And your husband is just filled with concupiscence.
That's right. It's a pretty simple apparatus, really, when you think about it.
It all fits nicely.
Yeah. So, and I'm not criticizing her, but that is sort of the I guess that is the effect of trying to incorporate all the rules, not just don't use contraception, which I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It isn't just the fact that you can't use contraception. That's the hard part. Although that is hard. It does make life hard. That isn't the part that really makes marriage difficult, in my opinion. It's all the other stuff, which we'll talk about here in a moment. So I listened to that one. I don't know if I listened to that one first or I listened to the next one. And I should pull it up, but I think I can convey the message. The other one it's a podcast of non-Catholic, but I would say evangelical Christians. Okay, couples. I think it's called Kingdom Sexuality. It's actually a pretty good podcast.
Okay.
Full of heresy, of course, because they allow oral sex and things like that us good Catholics can't enjoy, apparently.
Well, you can for a little bit, and then you gotta.
Well, you gotta finish right.
Yep.
That's always That's always the so.
That's the rule. Rules are the rules.
The rules are the rules, and they so. But it was so interesting because I was listening to this podcast, and literally, the intro, the 10 seconds in, it was a question about. Nate, please don't be offended by this. I'm just the messenger here. Okay. The argument was whether the wife should swallow or not.
Okay.
That was the debate.
I mean, it's probably her choice, right? Or what do they say?
I thought it was. I mean, I don't know. It was.
I'm just speaking philosophically
Yeah.
from the viewpoint of a non-Catholic.
Right, but they had a whole discussion on that about. I think the idea was the husband was bothered that his wife wouldn't, and I think which.
Oh gosh, get over that, buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
that was their like.
You
Why
poor
does it matter?
guy.
Why
Like-
does it matter to you, right? But I remember thinking to myself, well, the Ellen crowd wouldn't have gotten through the intro because you can't swallow. Like, the's no way that happens
Yep.
illicitly,
Only
right?
goes one place.
And I was just like, that just shows the difference between Catholics, if you're incorporating all the rules, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone else. And it's not like they don't have their own. I mean, they all have their own marriage challenges. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of them. I think there's a number of them. I mean, they're against abortion. I think a lot of them are against abortifacient contraceptions, but they kind of leave everything else to the discretion of the couple.
But some conservative Christian groups are against oral sex too, which is funny. They consider it sodomy. So I don't know whether it is or not. But
As a practice, even if it finishes the correct way, you're saying.
yeah, I think so. I think that's totally forbidden.
Yeah,
I think with some groups. I'm not saying.
Yeah, I think that is true for I think a lot of non-Catholic evangelicals. It isn't the finishing part. It's like you said. It's kind of a more
the
of
whole act then.
yeah. It's sort of a rigid, or I want to say, more of a literalist reading of, the old sodomy rules and stuff like that. So they wouldn't do it because of sodomy, not because it separates the unitive and
Yep.
the procreative end. I think.
It's a different kind of legalism.
Yes, exactly. Right. So, but I remember listening to that, and it's just like, because I think there's this perception, and you're going to hear this here in just a moment. I'm going to play a part of Ellen's podcast. There's this perception that if you don't incorporate all of the rules, marriage becomes too easy.
Oh, from the female perspective or whose perspective?
I don't, from them, I don't know, maybe celibates, maybe.
Just too easy. Oh yeah, my marriage is just too easy.
Right. It's
Bull
not
crap.
it's not enough that you can't use contraception. You got to. That's all this other stuff, and that's what. And I want to preface before I play a part of her podcast. I want to say, in my opinion, well, first of all, I think even marriage where you're using contraception is anything but easy for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Life is difficult.
Yeah.
Sharing a life with someone is difficult. Having children, most of them have children too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Life is difficult even under those circumstances. But setting that aside, any couple that's not using contraception, or let's say, your life is difficult. You have made your life hard. You have embraced something difficult that a lot of the world is not going to follow,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're already there. Whether you add other rules and tittles of the law in or not, you are making your life difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a degree of difficulty between those two things, between that and all of the other licit and illicit rules in the bedroom that I think take it from something that I think is difficult to nearly impossible. I was talking about this the other day. I was live streaming with D.W. Lafferty. I don't know if you caught that. If you haven't
Nope.
seen that, you should watch that.
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, I'm going to play a part of Ellen's podcast for you, and I want to get your reaction to it. So I hope the audio comes through okay. I was having some echo issues and stuff like that, but I think I got them worked out. So go ahead and listen to this a little bit.
But I got But I got into a conversation with a family member about what I do. And I actually really got into what it is that I talk about here on this podcast. I got into NFP, the church's teaching on contraception, on IVF. I got into conversations about, what is licit and illicit, what's moral in the bedroom. These things that I regularly talk about in the podcast. And this family member that I was speaking to, after I had kind of gotten on my soapbox and shared my whole spiel, just looked at me and said, "That's a really hard sell." And I wasn't quite expecting that reaction. I was actually more expecting kind of confrontation and arguing about how I was wrong or something like that. He just said, "That's a really hard sell." And I looked right back at him and I said, "Yeah, it is." Because here's the thing. What the church is calling us to in marriage, the openness to life, regularly, recognizing, communicating, understanding, unifying with our spouse in a way that respects the design of the sexual act is a very, very hard sell. It's not supposed to be easy to sell. It's not supposed to be easy to do. Marriage is not supposed to be easy to do. Having sex in a morally appropriate way that gives glory to God isn't supposed to be easy. The Christian life isn't supposed to be easy. Suffering is a part of the Christian life. And a lot of times we get really uncomfortable when you start talking about suffering inside of like marriage and sex. We're like, oh, we shouldn't suffer in marriage. But the thing is, like, Jesus suffered for us. His marriage to his bride, the church, was suffering. His marriage to his bride, the church, was his crucifixion on the cross. He suffered to marry his bride.
Maybe I am doing marriage right then. I don't know.
Mission accomplished.
I'm just kidding. I love my wife, but marriage isn't easy.
I mean, I had a couple of reactions to that. Number one, yeah, marriage is hard. And I think she undersells how hard it is.
She doesn't really know how hard it is yet. She's too young.
Yeah.
I mean, she's like probably 30.
Maybe. I think she's pregnant with their third. Maybe.
She's getting there then.
Yeah. Well, I don't think she understands how hard it is for her husband, probably. This is where...
Well, that's just concupiscence. That's the issue to deal with. I mean, it is in her mind, I think.
I was thinking about this the other day. I think if you follow all for the rules, let's say the NFP plus the illicit rules in the bedroom, and assuming you're not super scrupulous about spacing children,
mm-hmm.
I think NFP, or even if you're erring on and you're having more kids than you would want, I think NFP and that whole apparatus is much more difficult for women on an emotional and physical level, obviously going through childbirth and all that, and is much more difficult for men on a moral level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think most women appreciate the moral pain and difficulty that goes with this.
Mm-hmm.
I know she doesn't experience. There's no way she experiences what her husband does from the standpoint of the moral consequences of this lifestyle. Because he's a guy like everyone else, and whether he'll acknowledge it to her or not, he struggles.
Well, and she is the one that talked about how God designed it so perfectly that men have nocturnal emissions.
Yeah, that takes care of that problem.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Doesn't make it easy. And actually, so I was going to retweet this video, and then it got away from me again. There was this guy talking about, I don't think he's Christian or Catholic, but he's talking about how the desire for like sex happens every 3 days in men. And he talked about the physiological aspects of it. But he said one thing that was really interesting. about his personal situation, that he had a hernia surgery, and that side feels it much sooner than the other side.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, he's not. He really. It was an interesting video, but I don't know. My Twitter feed, apparently the algorithm knows what I want to read about. So, but it's a video for her to watch too, because basically the guy went through how every 3 days roughly is the time frame, and that's something that she would not buy.
Right. Yeah, and I don't think women have that.
They got a once a month sort of urge going on.
Right. For my wife, I would say 2 weeks is when it starts to hit her a little bit, which lines up really nice with NFP. Right?
Yeah.
Every 3 to 4 days does not line up well with NFP. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So I listened to that, and here, let me say this. There was something refreshingly persuasive about that as compared to the quote-unquote traditional teleology, the ends and the act. Like I sort of find it more persuasive that this stuff is good because it's hard and suffering is part of the Catholic Christian life. I actually think that, I'm not saying it's a good defense for the rules, but I actually think it might be a better defense for the rules than the traditional teleology. The problem being their foundation for these rules stems from all that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, they're talking about the consequence of it, that is the consequence of the sort of ancient medieval way of looking at these things.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it really, really hard. But they've sort of embraced the hardness of it as sort of proof that this is what God wants for us. And I really struggle with that idea. Because I think we did an episode months ago, maybe last year sometime, about there's sort of this cult of suffering that goes with Catholics. I think there was a talk about in Russia, there's this weird national pride in doing difficult things and stuff like that with everything that's going over there because of the war in Russia, Ukraine. There really is this sense that if I'm miserable and unhappy, this is proof that I'm doing what God wants me to do.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not saying can't be right, but I think that's a real poor litmus test for what isn't right and good for your marriage.
Especially when you're raising children.
Especially, this does affect you. It doesn't just affect you.
Do you want your kids to see a cold and miserable marriage? I don't know. Maybe that's...
There is... And again, I think they have to understand that even a relaxing of the rules, like let's say if we followed more of the evangelical approach, marriage still isn't easy. They have a podcast because it's still not easy.
It's true.
They have the same problems. The husband feels like he's not intimate enough, and the wife feels overwhelmed by children and all that. That doesn't change, even if you are not following any of these rules. So if that's your goal, if the proof is in the suffering, recognize that the suffering exists whether you follow these rules or not. It's just a matter of how much, and more importantly, how much it affects people other than yourself and even your spouse. Your marriage can and will suffer. Your children can and will suffer, especially if you don't just stop at not using birth control, but you follow all the other illicit rules that they're so, I don't know.
I have such a difficult time with it because I don't know if maybe the men just need to grow up or like just say, it's not important. But the problem is that it is really important. And I don't know how to get around that.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried multiple times in the past to be like...
You made a great attempt. Probably one of the greatest attempts that I know of.
And it felt like an eternity. It was a 30 days, like right.
Time slowed down.
It's right. And Ellen's little safety valve never came to rescue me either. Just so you understand that. So, but, and of course, some of the fans of the show are like, "Well, see, you did it. You showed that your marriage survived that." I'm like,
For 30 days.
Yeah, I'm like, well, yeah, but we also deprived our marriage of the benefits of that. I said I definitely could see it impacting my relationship with my kids, which is actually the main reason I stopped. I was very, very close to just losing it one day on my kids, and I'm like, okay. I've seen enough of this for now. This is not. It's not worth harming my kids to prove a point here.
It's time to tap out.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it can be done if your only goal is to make sure that you follow all the rules. It can be done, but it comes at a heavy price, and that's the question.
And you have to know if you're right, like if you're doing the right thing for your kids and your family.
And here's the added problem with all this. It's not only that it's hard and that it affects your kids and stuff like that. The reason why we're doing this isn't always very clear, and sometimes it doesn't make sense at all. Like suffering with purpose. Like if something physically happened to your spouse and you just could not be like that would be terrible, but you like it happens, like you understand there's a obvious reason why you're suffering now, because your spouse is physically disabled.
That's
now,
a different situation,
right? This is self-imposed. This is like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Yep.
We're making it this way.
No, I agree with that too. It's different if there is a reason for it. Whether it's pregnancy or sickness, like that, you can rationalize and you can just power through it. And maybe you should be able to power through the other areas of your life. But the problem is that it's so attractive. Like you just want that unity and the bonding, and then just obviously the biological aspects of it to be over.
Right.
So it's complicated.
So that, I think, is the part here that we're not supposed to talk about, but of course we talk about it. That I think is a real problem that the church or the Ellens of the world, or those who are sort of seen as authorities on the subject, just seem unable or unwilling to talk about it. And I would love to have this conversation with her.
Well, we tried that one time.
I mean, it's an open. I really don't like going out bashing other people, and I don't think I'm bashing her, but I could assure you, the door is open on our side, but there's no interest from their side of hearing what we have to say. Maybe Matt Frad, maybe I know you're listening to our show, Matt. Maybe you'll. I'd love to get on the show and talk to you about this stuff. I mean, I
just remember when we did talk to Ellen, and she was caught so flat-footed by any of this that she's like, "This is the first I've ever heard of this."
Yeah. I'm like,
this is
your.
The issues
how could you not understand? How could you not have heard this before?
And she said her husband had no problem with it, the abstinence, and it's like, by no problem, what exactly does that mean?
I'm gonna say with great confidence here, from personal experience and talking to a lot of other men, that if you as the wife in the relationship have this idea that it's difficult, but it's not. It's certainly reasonable to expect your husband to perfectly follow all these rules and not fall. And if he does, it's because he's kind of a pig and all that. If that's your attitude, your husband is never going. I mean, he is not going to tell you that he struggles.
Yeah,
and he is. So just so you understand, you have a husband that's dealing with this stuff, and he's afraid to tell you
every 3 days.
Yeah,
is a reasonable time frame. So just think about that. Every 3 days.
Are you doing that? If you are not, your husband is struggling with this. And if your husband is skipping the communion line on Sundays, or he's going to confession a lot, Here's why.
Or he wants to go to a different mass time than you.
Yeah. So I'm just perplexed at how much this problem is present in marriages. In marriages that, we like to pride ourselves because of NFP. We have this open line of communication, and we're talking about these things.
So one way line.
Yeah, it is, and again, I'm not here picking on the ladies. I'm really not.
Yeah,
But
there's just a lack of communication generally, I think.
but please just step back and ask yourself, if my husband is like Craig and Jonah at all, would he feel comfortable telling me that, and what would my reaction be? And ask yourself that honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that's happening out there. And I don't think that these other podcasts in any way promote that level of vulnerability and openness in marriage, because we've made those just completely off limits. There's no discussion about it. It's concupiscence. It's whatever. Someone was shared a video with me this morning. This priest was talking about the rules and how all attempts to undercut the rules are just the devil's trick. The devil's trying to attack this. Like if you even like raise questions or concerns, you're the devil's puppet. And man, that's a real problem. I don't think that's the case. Maybe it is. I don't know.
It's true. I don't know what percentage is biological, what percentage is that sort of temptation. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
How do you think the conversation would go if Ellen's husband came to her and said, I'm really struggling with these things? I'm not sure. You listened to her.
Yeah.
You must have some thoughts.
I mean, I think
I'm not sure what she would say as far as how you should.
now I will say this, and I have noticed a little bit. I have noticed changes, and I don't listen to her every week. I can only tolerate so much of it, but there's a definite change between how she talks about things and some things that she's sort of, I wouldn't say confessed, but acknowledged that some blind spots that she had, that she didn't realize she had a couple of years ago. So maybe she would be less traumatized by that. But I think it would be, but not necessarily, but I think it would be a hard thing to hear, because this is, it's sort of, and I would say refutes, but it's in direct contradiction to the worldview that you have built around yourself, and is part of your business. This is her vocation outside of her marriage, is sharing this stuff and promoting it as the way. And if my husband can't even follow, like, I think it could be an interesting wake-up call for her.
And I don't know if it was her that said this, but I think, where it's viewed as cheating on your wife if that happens. I mean,
yeah,
that's going to guarantee you never talk about it.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. I think that the church has enabled, not necessarily in a bad way, but has created this environment where women perceive that they equate that to cheating, and most people aren't going to push back against that, including their husbands, right? Well, he didn't object to that, so it must be right. So I think we just have to be a little more open to talking about, okay, here's the theory, here's the ideas, and now let's talk about the actual real experience and how it plays out, and why it's more than difficult. Like, I think it's almost impossible for most men to follow all this without any kind of moral snafus along the way, and also be a pretty good version of themselves to their wife and their kids and to other people.
Yeah.
I've seen enough to know that I've seen enough, experienced enough to know that is a very, very unlikely scenario even for short periods of time, even for 30 days at a time, much less months and years of this. Something is giving somewhere, either in the relationship, husband's personal life, both, whatever. Something is giving somewhere, because you can't maintain this, I don't think, for most people and for an extended periods of time. I just don't think you can.
Not perfectly.
And if we do nothing but acknowledge that there's slippage somewhere, that's a start. That's an improvement over what we have now. But I think right now they think, well, the slippage doesn't happen, or if it does, it's just the devil's ways, all that. And I just think I don't think that really respects the situation, and I think it doesn't necessarily represent how good those men are, despite all of that. Good men, the best of men, are going to find this almost impossible to live out. And I don't think it's enough to say, well, God calls us to hard things and all this. That can't be the excuse for everything.
I agree.
So, man, I'm really animated about this.
Yeah, you did get fired up. That's good.
So I would love to see the other podcasts, the other people out there grapple with this in an honest way. And I get it. I get the hesitation to do that, because even having this kind of conversation, I think, would make a lot of really good Catholic commentators feel very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. It's true. There's very few people as open or as honest as we are about this sort of stuff.
But it kind of goes with the territory, the way it's structured, the way it's laid out. These are the rules. These are intrinsic rules. You can't, I don't care how good your excuse is and what your circumstances are, you must not do these things. And if you do, it's a mortal sin, go to confession or else.
And yet it's a nearly universal experience.
And yet, yeah, exactly. That's what's so perplexing about that, and why we continue to talk. It's the fact that on the one hand, it is almost universal. This isn't a rare freak occurrence that happens to some guys. This happens to everyone.
Yeah.
On the one hand, and then on the other hand, you have
Which
just
is a funny metaphor.
Yeah.
Got both hands sometimes.
Tied behind my back and get all Alphonsus. So you have that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, you have just these absolute inflexible rules with the harshest of all consequences, which is your eternal salvation. Creates a
rock in a hard place, for another metaphor.
Man, exactly. Unparalleled anywhere else. Yep. in our faith, in our moral values, or whatever. I had a guy over on Twitter, young guy, nice guy, single, if that matters.
Yeah, it does matter. It always matters.
It's like, well, humans have disordered things all the time. Like the desire to use the R word or to kill someone and steal. I'm like, yeah, because we all struggle with that on
a crap.
Every 3 to 4 days. I have this insatiable urge to go kill someone, right?
Yeah, right.
I mean, can we stop using those?
It's ridiculous. The temptation to steal, murder, all that stuff is not anywhere remotely on the same level.
And just to point out the obvious, those all harm other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sorry, Christopher West.
Self-abuse.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, Christopher West, but there's no evidence that most of this stuff hurts yourself or your spouse.
Yeah.
At least not all the time. Maybe if you really take it to extreme degrees. But so that's why this is such an interesting combination of concepts, because it like I said, it affects all of us every 3 to 4 days. Mm-hmm. Maybe more often than that.
Yeah.
It's constant. It's near constant.
Unrelenting. And
so anyway,
there's no solution either. Ellen may be an expert in her field, but we are not experts. We're just sharing our experience.
Yeah.
And we don't know the answer either.
Yeah, we're just. these things need to be known, and people need to talk about these things, and spouses really need to talk about these things with each other. Please, 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 women out there, ask your husband and be prepared. Like, make it clear to him he can tell you the truth, and be prepared for whatever that is, and try to withhold judgment.
Mm-hmm.
You will unlock something in your marriage that you right now don't have.
Because open communication in marriage it leads to a much better marriage, without a doubt.
It may be painful at first. I know from personal experience. Ripping that Band-Aid off is painful.
Yeah.
But it is so much better than the alternative, which is to live in secret.
Maybe we can get on Pope Francis's radar and he can work this out before the time comes. It'd be like when Biden pardoned a bunch of people before he
there you go.
was done. So
I got
I would be fine with a pardon.
Can you make it proactive?
Like a papal pardon, yeah.
Yeah, I need to carry on to the future though.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think it's just so important that this get heard and shared and again, I mean no disrespect to Alan and but in fairness, I think what we're saying is fair, and so I really encourage people to think about it. An open invitation to Alan or Matt Fradd or Christopher West or anyone else out there wants to have these discussions. But I'm telling you, this we aren't going to just hold back and say the acceptable things. We're going to say these things, and we're going to challenge you.
I would love to talk to Christopher West.
Yeah,
he couldn't handle it. I know he couldn't.
You see it already. He's melting down,
feigning disgust.
I'd like to be in this. I'd like to have a 3-way.
All right.
As it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, "Oh."
Your fantasies are coming to life. Apparently.
Yeah, my fantasy is a 3-way with Matt Fradd and Christopher West. That's the kind of sordid stuff that happens to you. Fully clothed in a podcast studio. Okay,
all right.
Just so there are
even virtually is fine.
Yeah,
a virtual 3-way.
Exactly. We'll I'll set it up, but I would like that if everyone shows up, mans up, and has an open and honest conversation. I think that could be the most important podcast episode ever from the Catholic perspective.
Yeah.
So that's the challenge.
All right.
Talk to my agent. Reach out to us. We'll set something up.
Yep. Just tweet at us.
Just tweet. Whatever. Yeah. So leave a nasty comment in the whatever. Just get a hold of us.
Yep.
All right.
All right.
Woo. Okay. Well.
Wives, talk to your husbands.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's the moral of the story today.
Yeah. And tell us how that turned out.
Yep. We'd love to hear from you.
I'd love to hear the data.
The deer in the headlights look.
Yep. Don't blame us if it makes you, But I don't think
don't get divorced over this stuff, but just know it might be a surprising conversation.
Yep. I think you might be pleasantly surprised if you get past the initial shock. So. All right.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening to that. Thank you, Jonah.
You bet.
And until next time, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good one.